My worst experience with cocaine. This is literally my worst experience with cocaine that I can really actually remember. And that's why I have to say that this is my worst experience, because it sticks out in my brain, and unfortunately this haunts me a lot. And I don't think people realize how much during our drug abuse and our drug use, especially when we get sober, I think a lot of us as addicts have these certain experiences that still haunt us, that are always kind of there. It's like we've created our own trauma through our abuse of drugs. And this is mine, and this really has always kind of fucked me up. If you're new to the channel, hit the like and subscribe button. What's up, guys? My name is Eric, and I'm a recovering cocaine alcoholic addict. Those were my drugs of choice. My wife committed suicide, Brandy, in 2015, and after that is really when my addiction side really picked up strong. I was drinking 2 to 3 fifths of vodka a day at my peak. I was doing 1 to 2 8-balls of cocaine a day at my peak. And my life was a train wreck. It all fell, and thankfully I got sober 7/25/17. But this is my worst experience ever with cocaine. And it was actually Brandy and I together when this happened. So my worst experience is I was a manager at an RV dealership. We had a big RV show going on. And after that got done, Brandy used to always kind of keep me in check because she knew how obsessed I was with snorting stuff. We would do cocaine and stuff together. But she was able to control it a lot more than I was. Her drug of choice was more of benzos like Xanax, where mine was cocaine. She recognized that though, kept a lot of powder out of the house, and every now and then we would get some coke. Well, this time I ended up getting 2 8-balls of coke, and the coke that I got though, it had a little bit of a bluish tint to it, it looked like. It looked kind of almost purplish bluish, and I knew it wasn't good stuff, but I got a decent deal on it. I want to say for the 2 8-balls, it was like $500, which wasn't a bad deal at all. And I'm like, you know, it's just cut with some stuff, no problem. What I really think it was cut with was a meth. I'm almost 100% positive it was cut with meth. So brought that home, got a 30-pack. I know, I was like, hey, we're gonna party, and she was like, yeah. So we started, and we had a studio apartment, and at the time I loved it. We had actually a badass apartment. So we were like, all right, we're just gonna hang out downstairs. We're gonna play Wii bowling and stuff like that. And usually when we did a bunch of coke and stuff, we would literally like play games all night and talk. It was actually this weird bonding experience that we'd have together. That's how toxic we actually were as a couple. And so we started off, and it wasn't breaking up, I remember, extremely good, so we were hot plating it. So that's where you heat up a plate in a microwave, put the coke on there, it crumbles a lot easier, and chop it up. And I remember the first couple lines that we did, and we both felt the burn, because when you snort coke, coke does go down your nose a lot easier than what meth does. Meth, it feels like there's glass shards going down. And so it had a little bit of that feeling. I remember a little bit of the eye watering. And we were like, screw it, you know, we're gonna just kind of power through it. Because it still had a little bit of the aftertaste of what Coke has. Coke has a unique aftertaste and a unique drip. And so we started off kind of the normal of when we'd go. I would do 3 or 4 lines, she would do 3 or 4 lines. She was the only one that would do lines like the same as me. I mean, our lines are like that big by like that thick. We did big lines, and so now the dry mouth kicks in, so we start slamming beer, we're listening to music, kind of laughing, talking. And as the night progresses, we just keep going through this stuff. And the worst part is she could turn it off and I never could. I could not just say, all right, I'm good now, like, let's just chill. I had to have more. I always had to have more. I always could not lose my high. So I kept pushing her to keep doing more with me. We just kept doing more. We kept doing more. The worst part is like your sex drive hits real high, and so we're like naked trying to, you know, have sex, and when you're this high and this drunk, guys' body parts don't work. And so, you know, we had those failed experiments, and we're playing some, what was it? Uno, we were playing for a while, and then we ended up shifting over to just Wii bowling. And we just kept doing it and doing it. And I used to be able to like stop at like 1, 2 in the morning and like just force myself to kind of like shut down and go to sleep, because coke kind of leaves your system at about 15 minutes or so, 20 minutes. So usually if I would like lay down, I'd be really restless for a little bit, but eventually within like an hour or so, I could fall asleep and I'd wake up. So I'd set my alarm. This time it didn't work that way. Like, we just kept going through it. And as we kept using, her paranoia started to increase. She ended up getting really paranoid. She thought that there were SWAT teams on the building across from where our apartment was. She kept peering through the windows. She refused to take her hand off the door because she was like, if I'm standing by the door, the SWAT team won't bust it down, because if they kill me, they'll get in trouble. Like, that's how irrational your paranoia is. Your paranoia really is fucked up when you're high. And she was so set that, like, she couldn't leave the door. No one can leave this door because they can't bust it down, because if they hurt one of us, they're gonna, you know, get arrested themselves. Like, they won't do that. And she swore up and down that there are people on the buildings outside. And I remember even me looking out, and I'm not able to see this. And we've already went through one of the 8 balls, and we're on the second one now. And she stopped doing it because her paranoia had gotten so high. And we're just sitting there kind of playing Wii bowling, and it was just all she kept talking about, though, were these cops and people outside the door, and people trying to break in the door. And I'm just like, dude, there's nobody out there. And I couldn't get that through to her. And it was so bad that at one point she had to pee, and she's like, here, I need you to hold the door for me, because she would not leave our front door. Because how our thing was set up is we had this huge windows, 2-story windows in the studio apartment, because it was 2 floors. And she was holding next to the door, and our TV was over in the corner. And so in order for her to go to the bathroom, I had to put my hand on the door and keep, of course, playing Wii bowling. And she took her hand off, started going up the stairs, and she had to pee so bad that she ends up, like, peeing herself on the way up the stairs. Like, literally lost control of her bladder and didn't make it up to the bathroom because the bathroom was upstairs. I mean, that's how messed up we were, and I remember that. And she just had this massive paranoia to the point that I actually called in. It was the only time in my active addiction of any sort that I actually called into work and told them I was sick. I couldn't come in. I'm sure that the general manager that I talked to, who's my boss, probably knew that there was something pretty messed up in my way that I was speaking, the way that I was talking, because I'm sure I didn't make a lot of sense. And I ended up staying home with her. And the worst part about that night was it was almost like we'd gotten so high. At a certain point, finally, I took the rest of the Coke, and I ended up flushing it down the toilet, which for me as an addict, that was the only time I ever flushed cocaine down the toilet. That's the only time I ever flushed it down the toilet. And I remember, like, man, something's just not right with her. And it was like she almost never recovered from that, because after that, things were just almost like never quite right. Like, it never quite right with her head and her thought process. She started getting sick. And just, you know, a couple years later, I mean, her addiction with alcohol and pills really kind of took over. And it was one of those things that really held a lot of guilt in me. Like, man, maybe that night, if we wouldn't have done all of this mixed drugs, because it wasn't just cocaine, there was other stuff mixed in. And it's common that cocaine has stuff mixed in it, like caffeine. People mix in laundry detergent. They'll mix in, like, laxative. They'll mix in all this different stuff into this drug, but it's also not uncommon for people to put stimulants such as meth in cocaine, because, well, coke and meth are both stimulants, even though they're different. And I don't think she ever fully recovered. I think it rewired something personally in her brain, and it's something that I live with. It's the thoughts that I live with. I mean, I still have this day clear as day, like, in my head, of how our apartment was set up, to, you know, the whole full layout of that night, to what this stuff looked like, to flushing it down the toilet, because it really burned so much into my brain. And we were drunk. I mean, we had went through at least a 30-pack, and I know we had extra because we just kept drinking. I think we eventually finally that day passed out the next day right around like 1 or 2 in the afternoon. Your body, I mean, just couldn't take anymore, and we had no more drugs to kind of keep that bender going, so your body just kind of crashes, and we crashed. And I just remember even that the next day after that, just her so sluggish, and it was like, man, something bad happened with that drugs, and you get to live with it. And I mean, that's the reality of addiction. I mean, we hurt people around us inadvertently, on purpose, whatever it might be. And it is a struggle. It's a struggle to be an addict. And we think that it's our happiness. We think that it's life. We think that it's everything. And it's not. It actually tears our life apart, and it ruins the ones that we love. And unfortunately, August 27th, 2015, she ended up committing suicide. We were separated at the time. She lived in Yuma and I lived in California, because our addiction was so strong for different things. We were very codependent on a toxic level with each other, that I knew the only way for us to survive was to be apart and hopefully get sober. I never really even got cleaned up. I didn't get clean until about 2 years later. But she ended up taking her life, and then 2 years after that, my dad took his life. And that's why I share. I share for the one out there struggling. I share for the addict out there struggling, the addict out there that feels alone, that nobody can relate, just wanting to get sober. You want that sign to get sober, man, and here's your sign. Hit that like and follow button, comment down below, because we've all had these experiences, we all have these stories, and it's nice to know that we're not alone. And I can tell you this, that getting sober is one of the hardest things you're ever gonna do, but it also is the most rewarding thing you're ever gonna do. It makes a huge difference, and life gets so much better. So for the one out there struggling, man, it's one day at a time, and you got this.